I can still hear their laughter sometimes. It wasn't the warm kind that fills a room with joy. It was sharp, cutting, the kind that leaves scars deeper than any blade. It was last Christmas dinner. The table was crowded with family, the air heavy with the scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon. It should have been warm. It should have been safe. Instead, I felt like I was sitting under a spotlight, exposed and vulnerable. I was halfway through telling my Uncle Robert about my new art supply business, the one I'd poured every penny, every hour, and every ounce of my heart into, when my cousin Vanessa snorted so loudly she nearly knocked over her wine glass. "How's your little hobby shop doing?" she asked, her voice dripping with condescension, as if the very idea was a contagion. "Still broke yet?" chimed in my brother Derek, not even looking up from his plate. The table erupted in laughter. My father joined in with a chuckle that felt like a betrayal. My mother just shook her head with that pitying look I'd grown to hate. I said nothing. I just offered a small, fragile smile and let them have their fun. But something shifted inside me in that moment. I wasn't going to succeed for them. I was going to succeed despite them. After dinner, I escaped to the kitchen to help clean up, scraping leftovers into containers while trying to ignore the knot in my stomach. From the living room came the sounds of football and more laughter. Derek was loudly joking about how I'd probably sold maybe 5 paintbrushes all year. Next Christmas, maybe he'll be able to afford real cranberry sauce instead of that canned stuff, someone said, followed by more cruel laughter. I lowered my head and continued working. But then, through the partially closed door to the den, I overheard a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. "Poor thing," and Patricia whispered with fake concern. "Still chasing pipe dreams?" My father grunted. If he had any sense, he'd quit this fantasy and get a real job. The grocery store is always hiring. They all laughed. By the time he's 30, he'll still be in that dingy apartment, dreaming about his big break, Derek added. It's almost pathetic. Then came the words that cut deepest, from my mother of all people, the woman who always told me she believed in me. "Well, at least he's harmless," she sighed. "I mean, it's not like he'll ever actually succeed enough to embarrass us." I stood frozen, a plate clutched in my trembling hands. They weren't just doubting me. They were counting on my failure. They needed me to fail. It was easier to mock me for daring to dream than to acknowledge their own mediocrity and resentment. I was safer as the family joke, the dreamer who never achieved anything. Without saying goodbye, I placed the dish in the sink, grabbed my coat, and walked out into the cold night. The winter air bit at my face, but I barely noticed. One thought burned in my mind. Never again. I would never again seek their approval. I would never again justify myself to people who were actively rooting for my downfall. That evening, I sat alone in my small, drafty apartment, the one they always mocked, and stared at my laptop screen for a long time. I could either crumble under their ridicule or use it to forge myself into something unstoppable. I opened my business plan, tightened everything up, and mapped out every impossible goal I could imagine. Then I got to work. And I didn't stop. The 6 months after Christmas were brutal. I worked out of my one-bedroom apartment with temperamental heating and pipes that groaned like dying animals. My hands cramped from hours of typing, packing, and hustling. My eyes burned from endless screen time. I was up before dawn and collapsed into bed well after midnight. I didn't have a glamorous startup story. There were no angel investors or rich relatives offering loans. Just me, a second-hand printer, a laptop that crashed whenever it felt like it, and a heart burning with stubborn defiance. Some mornings, I'd sit at my tiny kitchen table surrounded by bills and empty coffee cups, wondering what I was doing. In those moments, I doubted myself more than my family ever had. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was just chasing fantasies. Maybe I really was nothing. But then I'd hear my mother's voice again. At least he's harmless. It's not like he'll ever actually succeed enough to embarrass us. And the fire would reignite. The turning point came in the most unremarkable way possible. A random online order I packed while half asleep. A customer I barely remembered who tagged my small business on social media with a photo and a few kind words about the quality of my art supplies. It wasn't viral. There weren't millions of likes or an overnight success story. But when I woke up the next day, I had 15 new orders, more than I typically got in a week. Then 25. Then 70. I scrambled to restock supplies, work faster, and update my website. For the first time, the momentum felt real and tangible. It brought new people too. Not relatives. Not doubters. People who believed in what I was creating, who sent notes saying, "You're making something special. Keep going." It hit me then how strangers could be kinder than the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. Among all the orders, shipments, and sleepless nights, I had a revelation. Family isn't blood. Family is loyalty. Family is respect. Family is love without conditions or judgment. Brick by heavy brick, the weight I'd carried my whole life, that desperate need for their approval, began to crumble. For the first time, I could see the path ahead clearly. It would be long. It would be lonely. But it would be mine. The life-changing moment happened on a rainy Wednesday. It's funny how pivotal events rarely wait for perfect weather. I was hunched over a stack of shipping orders at my kitchen table when an email arrived. I almost deleted it. The subject line, opportunity, looked like spam. But something made me open it. It was from Catherine Morrison, the owner of a boutique chain I'd never heard of, but who apparently had a significant following in the independent art supply world. She discovered one of my products through that small customer post months earlier and wanted to discuss a partnership. A big one, supplying her nationwide stores. I read her words repeatedly, as if they were in a foreign language. She loved the branding. She loved the quality. She loved the story. And if I could scale up quickly, she wanted to feature my entire product line. I didn't hesitate. I replied within 5 minutes, probably coming across as overeager, but I didn't care. She called that afternoon. Her voice was enthusiastic, professional, and kind. She asked about the size of my operation. I told her the truth. Right now, it's just me. She laughed, not my family's laugh of derision, but one of delight and admiration. That's even better, she said. People love authenticity. By the end of the call, I had a draft contract in my inbox. Within a week, I'd contacted a small fulfillment company to help manage production. By month's end, my little hobby shop was closing a deal that would put 6 figures in my account before summer. It felt surreal. I stood in that same small kitchen, the cheap linoleum sticky under my feet, rain tapping against the window, knowing my life was changing. I should have been ecstatic, but all I felt was this strange, quiet calm. I didn't punch the air. I didn't scream into the night. I just smiled, slowly and tiredly, and whispered to the empty room. You were wrong about me. Every single one of you. The next year passed in a blur of new contracts, sleepless nights, and relentless growth. I wasn't just getting by anymore. I was thriving. The little hobby shop they'd mocked had become a real company with employees, investors, and genuine momentum. The first time I wired 6 figures into my savings account, I just sat and stared at the screen for a long time. Not because I couldn't believe it. I'd always known this was possible. But because I didn't feel how I expected to feel. I felt no vindication, no triumph, just freedom. That's when I had the idea. I didn't want revenge. I wanted closure. I had no desire to show up at a family gathering with a bank statement. That would be too easy, too loud, too much like the child they thought I was. Instead, I would let them come to me. First, I bought a house. Not just any house, a modern mansion perched on a hillside. Floor-to-ceiling windows that captured every sunset. Marble floors that echoed when you walked. Space to get lost in. Each time I walked through those vast, empty hallways, I reminded myself, you built this. No one can take it away. My cousins used to joke I'd never afford anything better than a beat-up Honda. So I filled the garage with cars. A sleek black Tesla. A customized Range Rover. A vintage Corvette just because I could. I didn't post about it online. No selfies in front of luxury cars. No champagne toasts. I said nothing. Then 2 months ago, I sent a group text, family gathering. Sunday. Big news to share. Everyone accepted. Of course they did. Curiosity is a powerful drug. Deep down, they still thought of me as the loser they could comfortably pity. They had no idea their jaws would hit the floor before they even rang the doorbell. They didn't know the big news wasn't for them. It was about me and the life I'd built in their absence. The day of the gathering dawned crisp and clear, the sky so blue it looked painted. I woke early but wasn't nervous. I spent the morning walking through the house in silence, straightening a painting here, adjusting a vase there. Little meaningless tasks to pass the time. The Tesla gleamed in the driveway like a black mirror in the sunlight. Beside it, the Range Rover and Corvette stood proudly. By noon, hired caterers were preparing an elaborate buffet in the garden, complete with silver cutlery, white tablecloths, and buckets of chilled champagne. I didn't fuss. I just waited. The first car arrived at exactly 1 p.m. Vanessa. I watched as she stepped out of her dusty minivan wearing her trademark designer sunglasses. The moment she saw the mansion, she froze. She shot her husband a quick, sharp look as if to ask, "Are we at the right place?" A second car pulled up. Then another. And another. They spilled out onto the driveway one by one, their faces a mixture of confusion and disbelief. I could see Uncle Robert muttering something under his breath. Derek hummed to himself, trying to appear unimpressed. My mother stood motionless on the front steps, clutching her purse like a shield. For a long, beautiful moment, no one spoke. Then Vanessa laughed, too loud, too brittle. "Wow," she exclaimed, adjusting her sunglasses. "Are you, renting this place or something?" I smiled warmly. "Not renting. Bought it last month." She opened her mouth, then closed it. "You're kidding. This is a joke, right?" someone else said, half laughing, half panicking. They'd never been off balance before. They weren't used to me being in control. "Come in," I said, gesturing to the open doors. "Make yourselves comfortable." They entered cautiously, like visitors to a museum, afraid to touch anything. I watched them from behind as they moved through the spacious living room, the open kitchen, and past the glass walls overlooking the manicured backyard. I could see it in their expressions, the desperate search for an explanation that would let them maintain their sense of superiority. Their faces plastered with fake smiles. "Wow," Maya said. "This is really nice. Good for you." "Yeah," Uncle Robert added, giving me 2 firm pats on the back. "We always knew you had potential." I just nodded. Let them talk. Let them tie themselves in knots. I no longer needed their approval. Never again. I wasn't here to impress them. I was here to say goodbye. The catering staff circulated with silver trays of artistic appetizers. Smoked salmon bites. Mini beef Wellingtons. Tiny tartlets that looked too beautiful to eat. My family wandered around pretending to be at ease, laughing a bit too loudly, complimenting the furnishings, the view, the tasteful decor. But it was easy to see beneath the surface as their eyes darted around, trying to solve the puzzle they couldn't understand. How? Did he win the lottery? Was the struggle all a lie? They desperately wanted this to be unearned, because if it wasn't, it meant all their assumptions about me and themselves were wrong. Derek, always the boldest, pulled me aside by the champagne table. "So, seriously," he said with a forced grin, "how did you swing all this? Who's backing you? Is it some kind of crypto thing?" I smiled faintly. "I built it." He blinked. "Built what?" "My company. My brand. Everything." He looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "Built. Not lucked into. Not given. Built." Derek laughed, a weak, trembling thing that didn't reach his eyes, and patted my shoulder like I was a child. "Man, that's wild. Good for you. Really proud of you, bro." He wasn't. Not for a second. My mother watched me from across the room. She gave me that tight, strained smile she used to wear to family functions when pretending everything was fine. I nodded politely. Today, there would be no shouting. No arguments. No accusations. Just one clean cut. I checked my watch. It was time. I walked to the center of the room, where the marble floors gleamed golden in the chandelier light, and raised my glass, not for a celebratory toast, but for closure. The room instantly fell silent. Every conversation halted mid-sentence. All eyes turned to me, expectant and curious. After all this time, I finally had their undivided attention. I let the silence linger a beat too long, holding the glass loosely in my palm. I felt the weight of their gazes, but for once, it didn't bother me. For once, I commanded the room. First of all, I said in a calm, measured voice, "Thank you all for coming." A few polite nods. Uncomfortable shuffling of feet. "I'm sure you're wondering why I invited you here today," I continued. "And the truth is, it's not to brag. It's not to show off." I set my glass down on a nearby table with a gentle clink that sounded almost like a bell toll. "I invited you here because I owe you something." They perked up, sensing something. Perhaps they thought I was going to give them a piece of the pie. Perhaps they thought I was going to thank those who had always supported me for my success. I let that dream linger for one cruel heartbeat. Then I smiled, final and cold. "I owe you a thank you. Because without you, none of this would exist." Confused whispers. Uncertain smiles. "Thank you for every insult you ever threw at me when you thought I wasn't listening," I said, my voice steady as ice. "Thank you for mocking my dreams. Thank you for betting against me, doubting me, and showing me beyond any doubt that your definition of family was limited to your own comfort." Derek shifted uncomfortably. Vanessa looked like she wanted to say something, but no one dared interrupt. I leaned in slightly and took a breath. "You taught me something valuable. You taught me that real family isn't blood. It's loyalty. It's respect. It's standing beside someone when there's nothing to gain." I paused, letting the words settle. And because of that lesson, today isn't just a celebration of what I built. It's a farewell. The words hit them like a physical blow. I'm cutting ties, I said quietly. After today, I will no longer be part of this family. Silence. Complete, utter silence. Then the outcry erupted like a dam bursting. But we're family, Aunt Patricia exclaimed. Vanessa sputtered. You can't be serious. Derek stepped forward, looking suddenly afraid. Hey, come on. Don't be dramatic. Even my usually composed mother looked like she'd been punched in the gut. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. I just smiled, genuinely this time. Free. I wish you all the best, I said, and I hope someday you realize what you lost. Then I turned to walk away. I didn't look back. I could hear the frantic calls behind me, the pleading voices growing fainter with each step. Wait, please don't do this. We didn't mean it. You're making a mistake. I kept walking, past the marble floors, past the gleaming chandeliers, past everything that meant nothing compared to my self-respect. I reached the front door, paused, and then closed it behind me without a second thought, like the final period on a chapter. The heavy sound echoed through the house, marking not just the end of that day, but of my old life. The air outside felt different as the door closed behind me. A cool breeze caressed my face. The driveway was bathed in soft golden light as the sun began to set. Quiet. Peaceful. For a moment, I just stood there, taking it all in. Not numb. Not guilty. Not second-guessing myself. My old life was behind those walls. The days of begging for scraps of affection and chasing validation were finally, completely over. And as I stood there under the open sky, I realized the silence wasn't emptiness. It was freedom. I owed them nothing. No explanations. No apologies. No forgiveness. They had made their choices. And finally, I had made mine. For the first time in my life, I wasn't running away from them. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was simply moving forward without them. Months have passed since that day. The phone calls eventually stopped. The text messages too. First angry, then guilt-tripping, then desperate excuses. I answered none of them. And you know what? I've never regretted it for a second. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't to seek revenge, but to simply walk away and build something beautiful without the people who said you never could. That's not revenge. That's justice. That's not spite. That's self-respect. That's not the end of a story. It's the beginning of a better one.